the three things that I think our region can do world-class at are outdoor recreation and tourism, value-added ag and food, and then arts, culture, and events and entertainment, right? Those are things that are not, yes, Bellingham can do some, and Everett can do some, but nobody can do those things, especially layered, like we can.
Hey, Islanders, and welcome to episode 137 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the executive chairman of Spinach Bus Ventures. Please welcome Andrew Miller. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview local business owners, comedians, singers, and more. I dive into their backstory to find out how they got where they are, what are some of the tips for you to do the same, and find out where they are going. Tune in every week as I interview more of the people you see every day. Hello. Welcome back to another episode, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm recording this just slightly after Easter, so hope everyone had a good Easter. We actually, I don't think I've mentioned it on this podcast. It was kind of hard to talk about and still is to some degree, but my mom, about a month ago, had a stroke, and so we've, as a family, been kind of working through all of that. But a week ago, she was actually brought back home from the hospital, still doing rehab and stuff. But Easter turned out to be the first day that all of the family got to come back together. So my family and my brother-in-law or my sister and her family and all the grandkids. And that was the first time they got to see Grandma since the stroke and everything's happened. So it was just a really, really special day. On top of it being a big day for us, I think I've mentioned before that we're Christians, and so Easter obviously is a very significant holiday for us. But on top of that, to have, kind of it be this day where all the grandkids get to see Grandma again. Just really, really special day. So, had a great Easter. Now I'm back into it. So back to the podcast. So, anyways, I hope you guys all had a great Easter as well. So today I'm interviewing Andrew Miller, as I mentioned before, and some of you might be asking, like, wait, isn't this guy from Skagit? Why am I interviewing? I actually been trying to expand and branch out a little bit with the Camano Voice and really reach out to local business owners, people that really have grown businesses or are working in their community to make it a better thing. And Andrew, I got connected with him actually from my podcast with Jeff from Cascadia Stoneware. And so he's been on my list for quite a while. And Andrew encapsulates so much of what I want to see in businesses and small business leaders, of helping small businesses in the community that you're passionate about, and growing these businesses that further the community, not just, someone's pocketbook. And Andrew has done that. He's done that in many ways. He started out in the Air Force, and we'll get into kind of his whole backstory, which is long and extensive, and he's had a huge amount of experience in all of this. But when he started Spinach Bus Ventures, I can never say that right. Spinach Bus Ventures, it's like a venture group, and it started really small with taking over Tulip Town. You might have seen that in like the local Skagit newspaper. It was a couple years ago now. But since then, they've continued to add to their portfolio. And each business is very specifically a small business that is trying to move Skagit further ahead. And as many of you know, I live in the Skagit Valley. I live in Mount Vernon. But I grew up on Camano, so that's why I have my feet in both worlds. But fascinating interview. Super excited to share this with you guys. And as you may have noticed in my more previous podcasts, my podcasts kind of range in time length. Some are like a half hour, some are an hour. I'm moving more towards like long form podcasting. So you will notice that some of my episodes go a little bit longer, and I'm going to stop breaking those into two different parts, just so you guys can get the whole story in one swoop. So you're going to start seeing maybe some podcasts that come out that are in that hour length. And hopefully that allows you guys to just listen to it on the way there to work and from work. So let me know what you guys think about that, though. You can always email me. It's voice@camanocommons.com. I'd love to hear from you guys. Also, follow me on Instagram at, I think it's the Camano Voice is my tag, my symbol, whatever that thing's called. Handle, that's the word. So anyways, I've talked long enough here. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Andrew Miller. Hey, Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the co-owner of Tulip Town, as well as the executive chairman of SB Venture. Welcome to the podcast, Andrew Miller.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Andrew.
Oh, a little bit about Andrew. I grew up in Mount Vernon, on the hill, and I went to Mount Vernon High School and had a great time there. Had the best experience growing up I think that a kid could have. And then I went and lived in Brazil for 2 years as a missionary.
Okay.
I came back and joined the Air Force, and I got married, and then I've bounced around. Haven't been able to keep a job since. And so, we've been all over the world doing all kinds of fun things, and ended up home, and that was something that was really important. Along the way, I picked up 6 kids, so that's a lot. Usually what people remember. We talk about being a farmer, but I was a rancher before I was a farmer because I had the 6 kids. That's actually the only thing that qualifies me to be a farmer is that I have a lot of kids. So, we made our way back to Skagit Valley after my experience at Amazon. And I said, hey, if I could do anything, I would go home and raise my kids in the environment that I grew up in and solve problems for my neighbors,
Yeah.
And so we've been hard at that ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, so you grew up in Mount Vernon then. Did you spend your entire childhood there then?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I was born in Idaho, but I got here as soon as I could. I was about 6 months old when my parents moved to Mount Vernon. And, yeah, so it's all I ever knew growing up was Mount Vernon, yeah.
Nice. How was... Because Mount Vernon has gone through, much like Camano has gone through a very big growth and evolution over the last 20 plus years. What was Mount Vernon like for you growing up?
Mount Vernon, like I said, it was an idyllic place to grow up. It was one of those where I walked to school, Jefferson Eagles, but I would ride my bike up Little Mountain, or we would just spend time in the park. And one of the things that I think is most remarkable about growing up when I did was when you were 11, it was just common. It was like an expectation that you were out picking strawberries, right? And so that was my first job, was picking strawberries and then roguing spinach. And then, and I happened to break out of that and was a lifeguard at Clear Lake. But it was this, it was great that everybody worked. And I remember I was a junior in high school and the English teacher was like, hey, write about what you did this summer. We're all sitting there blinking at each other like, well, hello, we all worked in the fields, And she said, it's actually pretty remarkable that you, as, white middle-class kids are working in the fields all summer. Like, that doesn't happen everywhere else in the world. And we kind of shrugged our shoulders and said, well, this is all we know. But that really has shaped, as I look around at my friends and classmates, and it was a defining experience. It was a great time to be able to take on the world. We won state basketball championships and baseball and soccer. We were all over the place, and nobody could keep us down because we were kids from the valley, which was really exciting. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like kind of similar to like what Twin City was out here. Like a lot of the kids would get summer jobs out there and just go and work the fields. And
well, I like to say that Stanwood Camano identify more with Skagit than Snohomish, so you can put me on record for that. Now, from a cultural perspective, it's absolutely true, right? Now, we just have that rural ethic, and that was amazing. I don't want to say it's remarkable. Growing up, it wasn't remarkable. Looking back, it was absolutely foundational to who I became.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you work a few days in the field, or all summer.
Yeah.
You learn a lot about just, getting stuff done. Just
totally.
Go next thing. And not having to complete it. I think when you work in smaller scale things in school, like you have these deadlines, you've got these projects, you get them done and they're done.
Yeah.
But that's not how most of the world works. Most of the world, you step into a story that's already being written and you never get to finish it.
Right. Well, and farming is never done. Yes. Right. And that's the other thing, that when I came back to Skagit Valley, I worked in economic development, and I just remember time and time again, it was, Andrew's from here, and the barriers came down because not everybody that I worked with was from here. And I started to wonder why. I'm like, well, that's actually that's a little bit lame, isn't it? And then I realized it really comes down to trust. Because, Skagit Valley and Stanwood and Camano and these valleys here in Western Washington were carved out of farming, logging, and fishing. And those are 3 of the most dangerous, occupations that you can do. And so trust is a really, really big deal. And when you're from the community. We joke on Spanish Bus all the time. If we screw something up, we're going to hear about it at church, right? Our parents are going to hear about it. And so there's staying power, and it really just gets back to kind of that value statement of, hey, we're in it for the long haul, and we know we're going to have to, we're not in and out.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have to own what you come up with. And so, yeah, it's stuff that you learn in the fields. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think that is something with this area, both areas, but I actually live in Mount Vernon.
Oh, yeah.
But I grew up on the island. But that is something like when you're talking to people, like Skagit is a weird subculture of the West Coast in the sense of
totally.
like, you've got King County, you've got these counties that are all like they've got lots of people that come in and out. But Skagit is very much for Skagit. Like it's protective of itself, it's protective of its people, and the land. Like it cares about everything from top to bottom.
Right. Well, and I talk a lot about, the rate of change outside of Skagit Valley from Arlington to Alger, right? It's changing so fast, and it's almost like we're at the end of the whip.
Yeah.
So that gives us a little bit of time to position ourselves, and sometimes it creates a false sense of security, right? Where it's like, oh, we don't have to change because the world's, going to just leave us alone, where that's absolutely not the truth. And I think one of the opportunities, especially that we've leaned into on the Spinach Bus, is just really trying to figure out the economics of what does quality of life look like, in the next, 20 months or the next 20 years.
Yeah.
How can we position against the urban pressures of two of the hottest economies in North America, between Vancouver and Seattle? What does that mean for those of us that grew up here? And it stings when we get it wrong. I mean, we're getting it wrong on housing massively, right? And in small businesses and some of these other things where I don't think we're leaning into our unique value propositions like we could. And I don't blame anyone for that. What I think is we've got some opportunities to rally and do better.
Yeah.
But it is, in many cases, it's Fort Skagit, it's Fort Stanwood, it's Fort, where you want to push back against the things that you don't like.
Right.
But we got to come up with things that we do like and that we can do really well pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So, what did you go to school for?
Oh, that's funny. I was thinking about that on the way down. I went to school really for the credential and for the network. And that's why I have a Bachelor of Science in Liberal Arts.
Okay.
My undergrad, I was in the Air Force, and I knew that I wanted to get a commission. And the Air Force doesn't really care what your bachelor's degree is in.
Okay.
So I was a linguist, so I did a lot of CLEP tests. But I think in the first 4 years that I was in the Air Force, we moved 11 times.
Okay.
But every base I stopped at, I would take classes. And so I was able to package my all of those credits together, like I said, in an undergrad degree, and got picked up for officer training school. And then when I was in Spokane, I went to school for Gonzaga tickets, right? So my first master's degree is in organizational leadership at Gonzaga, because I knew that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just knew I wanted to be a leader.
Yeah.
So I got a degree in leadership studies, organizational leadership, and I got Gonzaga tickets. So go Zags. And then I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer because the people that I looked up to were lawyers. And so that opportunity presented when I came off of active duty and I became a full-time Air National Guardsman. So I got to work all day, and then I go to law school at night. And that's, again, there's no lawyers in my family, nothing like that. When I looked around, the people I looked up to were attorneys. And then when I was at law school, this is, of course, post 9/11, but a lot of the work that I did as an intelligence officer was in counter narcotics, counterterrorism. And so I got pulled into, or I didn't get really pulled into, I was attracted to the Center for Homeland Defense and Security at the Naval Postgraduate School.
Okay.
And I didn't take a sabbatical. And then at that point, I was working full time. We had 5 kids. And I was a law student, and I was a member, and I was getting another master's degree. And so I actually found my limit in preparing for the bar exam and trying to knock out my thesis at the same time. So I delayed my thesis and took the bar exam, which I passed, which is fun. But I loved that. I loved that program, and I tackled that program. So I went to school for that program because of the network.
Okay.
I had a chance to be in Monterey for a week every quarter. And spend time with the movers and shakers across Homeland Security. So, sheriff's deputies from LA County and NYPD and NYFD and the State Department and FBI, and that was the coolest experience just in terms of exposure. So that's when I went for that. And then lastly, I got my MBA from PLU, and I went to school for that because at that point I'd had enough friends that had practiced law. They said, Andrew, you don't want to get into this. And the only way to justify getting a JD without practicing is to get that MBA. And so I went to PLU and picked up the MBA, which I absolutely adored too. That was a lot of fun. And so that's, so that I know of, I'm only the only trilingual JD MBA in Skagit. And that's, of course, what happens. You don't go to work for McKinsey in Miami. You move home and become a tulip farmer in Mount Vernon. So that's what I've done with all that education. Sorry, Mom.
Wow. Okay, so how did you get into the Air Force?
So I got married right when I got back from Brazil, and I knew that, one, I come from a long line of veterans. My dad is Air Force vet, my uncle, all of my uncles, all the way back through the Revolutionary War, right? We can trace that. Wow. And so I had an interest in serving, and I spoke Portuguese, and I really found out that I love foreign languages and that I love really associating with other cultures. And then I found out that you could be a linguist in the military, and then that just took off. Okay. And so I joined the Air Force to be a linguist. And it's fun. You don't know what language you're going to get when you sign up to be a linguist. And I was assigned Serbo-Croatian, right? Which is super cool because I was going to go. And the other thing that the worst kept secret in the military is that the language school is in Monterey, California, which is the coolest assignment that you can get. Okay. So you're paying. What you mean to tell me is you're going to pay me to live in Monterey, California, and learn foreign languages? Yeah, I'll take that assignment. So I got there, and then they ended up, and this is actually very timely, but they were transitioning a bunch of Russian linguists into Serb, and this is in '98. So they said, well, we're not going to put you in Serb. What language do you want? I said, well, how about Spanish? And I said, well, you already speak Portuguese. We're not going to teach you Spanish. I said, yeah, but if you teach me Spanish, then I'm going to be able to communicate with 98% of the people in our hemisphere. I said, okay, maybe we'll do that. So I moved into Spanish, where I did really well, which it worked for me because then I got my choice of assignments, and I got to fly in the back of C-130 jamming platforms out of Tucson. So I had the coolest enlisted job that you could have. I was an enlisted aircrew member. So I got to wear the flight suit and walk around like I own the joint, and that was great. So that was the attractor there. And then I commissioned, and that was great too. I really enjoyed being an intel officer. Okay, wow, yeah. Looking at your background, you had an extensive time in the Air Force and military, and I mean, thank you for your service. But what were your biggest things that taught you, I guess? Well, I never did one thing, and that's the other thing. People they look at that and they say, "There's no way." Even living in fast forward, Andrew, you don't be able to. Nobody does all of these things, and I think I had a Sunday school teacher growing up that would just say, "We just do hard things and take advantage of opportunities," and so I've kept doing that. And I think for me, that some of the most the experiences that I had in uniform that are most cherished are really in. It's not in killing people and breaking things, right? And that's what the Department of Defense is. It's their motto, if you will, that they don't talk about. But it was in the camaraderie. I really enjoyed being part of an air crew that was able to put aside any differences and go to work doing hard things on behalf of our country. Yeah. And so that was a high point for me. And I also really enjoyed being part of the transition. At the thinking level, away from, when I came in, it was before 9/11, right? I mean, like I said, it was about Croatia, the Serbian war was going on. And then I remember walking, I was in Intel officer school on the morning of 9/11. And I remember we walked out of class, we were going to some graduation or something like that. And the TV was on in the break room, and somebody said, "Hey, what movie is that?" Because, you see the smoking towers, and that moment changed, the lives of millions of people. And it made a difference for me as well. I mean, it became very real, very fast, what would be asked of me. And my family and I and millions of other families really, made the pivot on behalf of the country. And so that's something that I'll cherish as well, as being a part of that pivot. We definitely didn't do everything right. We continue to fail forward in many ways, but I was proud to have been able to serve during this time. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So then, on top of that side, you also did some work as a professor? I did, yeah. So that's another one of those things where you get a terminal degree, and all of a sudden people want to talk to you, especially when you have kind of a niche position in where I sat in terms of strategy and intelligence. And so I taught And I got sucked right in with the terminal degree to be able to teach in grad school. So I taught online at American Military University and Drexel and Homeland Security, and was part of all of that. And what I loved about that is if you want to learn something, you really need, if you really want to know it, you need to be able to teach it.
Yeah.
And so I was able to do that. And I love being in the classroom. I absolutely love being there, and virtual or otherwise. Just the idea of just the intellectual curiosity and being able to discuss ideas, especially big ideas, which is why I really enjoyed teaching grad school.
Yeah.
So I got to do that as well. And then I taught up at Western when I came back. So
Okay.
I taught in the Leadership Institute at Western, which I absolutely loved. Love teaching leadership, love studying leadership, because it's foundational to getting so many things right.
Yeah.
And Western's a great school too. So
Yeah.
got to do
So
that.
what are the how do you distill being a good leader? No. What are the principles that through all of your time, both in military, your professorship, that leadership, like the core things that you have found that are important?
Yeah, I think, well, and you wouldn't know this by looking at it, but focus is absolutely critical. And then having at the same time a wide enough scope to appreciate that you don't know everything.
Yes.
To be able to come in. And then I don't know, I talk about my superpowers. You know, if I have a superpower, it's in bringing a lot of enthusiasm and a critical eye at the same time to challenges and opportunities, to turn around and say, hey, here's what could be, who's on board. And then turning around and saying, hey, well, here's what we need to resource at. Where I have not done a good job, and this is confessional, is and maybe it's because I was in the military for so long, but I always assume that people upstream from me are going to have my back in the same way that I have the back of my team, which is another reason that I bounced around quite a bit. Because if people say that and they don't do that, it becomes pretty apparent pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I've absolutely. So there's probably two tensions in there. In that being all in and supporting the team and building a vision is something that I think is critical. You can do management without that, right?
Yeah.
Just moving resources around, making sure that and not to throw any shade at management is absolutely critical for the good order and function of any organization. But leadership, really that compelling vision of what could be, and distilling that down into next actionable steps that people actually, that they've got the reach and the muscle to move that lever.
Yeah.
There's a skill in that, and I've enjoyed finding what that means for me. And I think at its core, I was just talking to my son this morning, it's about empathy and curiosity, and really just, if anything, enthusiasm coming at something, because the life will keep kicking you in the shins, and boy, we see that has been my life, at least, as a tulip farmer as well, and it's interesting. It's been fascinating to have both the educational background on that, and then to live it, and then to live it in front of 500,000 people, that are watching or more, which is not something that I had supposed before we got into this. Yeah.
Well, I think that has been the biggest thing in running a small business is deciding the direction that you want to take it, figuring out what is your mission, and not just being something you plaster on the wall that
Right.
hey, look, there's our mission statement, but really living that out and having your team see that. And this kind of all falls to me is the biggest thing has been company culture, is like building the culture that you want. Because if you have the culture that you want, but the team that understands and buys into that, the customers will be taken care of well. Like the jobs will be done well. Like everything else falls underneath that, and that's the hardest part.
No doubt. No, and nothing is harder. And again, and it's funny too. It's like, what do I know about small business other than you learn small business by doing small business? Because my background have been in government and law and business, and I was at Amazon, which might as well be government, right? I mean, it's so big, and then to turn around and say, hey, no, and that's a cliche in small business, is that it only works if you do.
Yeah.
And that, if you're just chasing a buck, is very, very difficult, especially to build a team around. I get it. If you're a one-man or woman truck and you're just a subject matter expert and you're really good at what you do, absolutely. Your why is yours, right? It's your boat in the driveway or a week in Hawaii, whatever it is that's your motivation. As soon as you need to scale that to a +1, it's more than just making money. And that is something that I think is fascinating, because it's also on trend for an evolving demographic, right? The market, if you will, for especially for things that we can do really well here in Western Washington.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think I've said this many times on the podcast, but we're in such a unique area of just even within the country that so much of what we need, produce, everything can come right from here.
Oh yeah,
Like we don't need to go outsource it or bring it in. Like we have everything here.
we do. Yeah, and food security should never be an issue, especially with the all of the grain and potatoes that we can make. Nobody is going to go hungry if we can get this right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very cool. So, so then you mentioned already you worked at Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of, because you were in the military and you've done these other things. What kind of got you into Amazon?
Yeah, I failed into Amazon. No, so I was at Expedia, and I was brought on at Expedia so that was my transition from the military into the private sector. And I did a little bit of consulting at Weyerhaeuser, which was awesome too. That was strictly strategy. And then in Expedia, they brought me in based on my planning expertise.
Okay.
So it was to redo their business continuity program for one of the divisions. Cold, right? They brought it literally. I came in. The guy that hired me was his last official duty was hiring me, and then he was gone. I was like, oh, okay, so apparently this is a thing. And I finished that job up too fast, and I moved into an area of interest for me was in veterans and supporting veterans, and so I helped build our veterans recruiting program. And they're just saying in venture capital that timing is everything. And apparently, I was about a year early in that space because they had decided that they wanted to do some other things, and then turned into, hey, if you want to be a recruiter, which I did not want to be a recruiter, I wanted to build a program because I'm a builder. And then opportunity opened up at Amazon. And of course, it was across the lake. We lived in Puyallup at the time, so it was easy. My wife's from Puyallup, and so I wanted to tackle that one. I knew it would be a great place to have been from. It's a great place to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And so I moved into business continuity there as well, in the health and safety and security department, which I absolutely loved. I got to build a team, but I had 3 bosses in 9 months, and each one of them had a different idea of the direction that they wanted to take.
Oh my word.
The work, and I could deal with that. I was making commitments to my team members, then I was having to walk back, and so we ran the crisis center, and so it was kind of like 911 for corporate Amazon, and I needed to have a watch supervisor, if you will, and so I would bring guys and gals in and say, hey, look, here's what I need, and they said that's great, but I want to go get my MBA at UW, and I thought that's great. No, because we're always open, so if you want to work weekend, double shift on a weekend and from 10 to 6 a.m. every day, that's great. We can do that. And then I'd have a boss say, "Oh no, we don't do that around here." I'm like, "Well, it's Amazon. We're flexible." There's I just don't like that. You have to tell them they can't do that anymore. And they've organized their lives around that. And I made a commitment to them. And I said, "Yeah, if this is how it works here, it's really not gonna work for me."
Yeah.
I think we really get our best out of our people when we say, "Here's the nature of the opportunity. What do you think?" And then allocate the resources and the talent to make that happen. And I think at the Bezosphere, you see that, but I got stuck in the Bozosphere at Amazon, and it just didn't work. And so we took a step back and said, if we could do anything, what would we do? We would take that same approach and go home. And so that's what we did. We came home, yeah.
So what was that like for you then? You finally left Amazon. You're looking at I'm assuming you didn't have anything lined up yet.
No, well, I didn't, and that was kind of one of those things where it's just a leap of faith. And the Economic Development Alliance of Skagit County EDASC was reorganizing at the time, and I knew some folks, and like a lot of things, it wasn't one of those things where you go to school for. But I looked at it and said, well, nobody goes to school for economic development. This is just problem solving, right? This is strategy. I can do that, and so. Sat down with the CEO there, and he said, yeah, it looks like something we could do. And what I absolutely loved about that job was I really got to study the opportunity. I got to take a step back and say, hey, okay, here are the systems, here are the opportunity, here are the trends, and here are some of what I think could be the unique value propositions here are the things that we can be best in the region and maybe even the world at. Mm-hmm. And we should probably organize, our businesses and certainly our systems and infrastructure around taking advantage of those and making them approachable, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I found really, really interesting. There's still an opportunity to do that here in Skagit and Stanwood. So
yeah.
So
what did that kind of look like for you then, getting into it all?
Well, it was great, because I got to have that curiosity of tell me about your work, tell me about this, and I love sitting down with with 2.5 feet of printed out reports and reading books and listening to podcasts and a lot of just-in-time learning around that and really bringing my curiosity to both conversations with people and then seeing how policy affects people. And so I found hope every day in economic development, which is something that's pretty rare, you know, especially with all the doom and gloom that you see. And so I enjoyed that, you know, it also gave me time to go to my kids' tennis matches, and it was just great not having to schedule an hour and a half commute. It took me 12 minutes to get from home. And it's funny because you know, we have meetings in the mornings, like, you know, in Seattle and Bellevue, there's no morning meetings because you're in the car, right? And service groups that meet at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 in the morning for Rotary or something. That I loved getting back to that. And everyone, now I can't do meetings after 4:30 because I coach soccer. It's like, well, of course you do. Everybody does, right? And it was so refreshing to come back to.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then, how did you get? So I guess during this time, then, is this when you were kind of looking at other opportunities for yourself as far as other business ventures?
Yeah, what I did is I tried for almost 3 years to get people to do these ideas, right? And it's like, well, somebody should really do this, and I was again raised that somebody's looking back in you in the mirror, right? Yeah. And so I was no chance encounter, but I was a yell leader in high school, and a bunch of the cheerleaders got together. This is the only time, and God bless my wife. But she says, yeah, go ahead. You should go out and go out with all of your high school cheerleader friends, Andrew. So we did, and I connected with a couple of them. And Rachel and Angela just said, you know, they had not been back to the Valley in a while. And they kind of pulled me aside and they said, hey, you know, what happened? It just doesn't feel like home anymore. What's going on? I said, well, I'll tell you what happened. What we really need is a vision and some capital to do some stuff. And they said, okay, you do the vision and we'll come up with the capital because we feel like there's some things that we could do in our community and we can do them better. And being from here creates, and so that's been our tagline is you know, we work on those projects that are important to us because this is what raised us. These are the things that were important. And I put together kind of an investment portfolio and strategy around value added. And again, I've said that the three things that I think our region can be world-class at are outdoor recreation and tourism, value-added ag and food, and then arts, culture, and events and entertainment, right? Those are things that are not, yes, Bellingham can do some, and Everett can do some, but nobody can do those things, especially layered, like we can.
Yeah.
And I said, we need to show the community that we can be successful in these things, and then so that's how we jumped into all of the different businesses that we're doing.
Okay. Awesome. And so where does the name, I called SB Venture in the intro, but you mentioned it as Spinach Bus.
Spinach Bus. Yeah. So Spinach Bus is fun. It's like, well, what are we going to call it? Well, Spinach Bus, growing up, you would meet in downtown, right now where there's a 7-Eleven going in right downtown off of Kincaid. It was the old Alf Christensen seed processing plant that was there. And so every morning, 7 a.m., parents would drop off all their 13-year-olds and you'd hop on the bus, and it was called the Spinach Bus. And it was the most fun, hard work that you could do.
Yeah.
And we said that's very fitting for what we want to do next.
Yeah.
Is we want to do the hard work that needs to be done in our community and have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
And we've shown that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the name. So I'm assuming then through all of this then, how did you guys come in contact with Tulip Town and the owners?
Yeah, so I put together a list of about 30 different potential acquisitions or people that we should talk to, things that we could do when we started Spinach Bus. And Tulip Town was on the list. It was not even in the top 10. And but because tulips are so iconic for Skagit Valley, Rachel and Donnie and Angela all went to, three of my partners went to the Tulip Festival Gala. This must have been in 2019. Yeah.
Okay.
And I wasn't there because I was halfway. I was on my way to Moab with my kids for spring break, and I get a call about Tri-Cities from Rachel saying, "Hey, I think we should buy Tulip Town." So apparently, what had happened at this gala is that Tom and Jeanette Degody, who were the founders and former owners, stood up and just said, you know, here we've been trying to sell the farm. There have been 15 other people that have been interested, but they don't share our values or they're from out of the area, and we really just want it to stay local, and that really struck a chord with our team there. And I think that was on a Thursday. We had an offer on Saturday, was accepted, and the Monday when I got back, I became a tulip farmer in training with Tom. And that was curious too, because I certainly, when I said, hey, yeah, we should do this, I didn't think, hey, I'm going to become a tulip farmer. Tom was in his 80s and no spring chicken, but he was going to teach our team, how to grow tulips. And he ended up passing away 2 weeks before we closed on the property. He on his tractor with his boots. He went out with his boots on his farm, and so that was how he wanted to go, according to Jeanette. And so, but that threw me headlong into, we were able to retain the team there, who then taught us how to be a tulip farmer. But it became really apparent really quickly that one of us as an owner needed to be on the farm, making sure things were happening, and that fell to me, and I loved it. And it's funny too, because I remember it's like I didn't grow up farming. I didn't, I never thought that I'd be a farmer. But I remember waking up I think it was in June, after we had closed. And first thing I did, it's 4:00 in the morning. I rolled over to see what the temperature, the ground temperatures were, and what the moisture was in the soil, because we were going to plant some corn. And I said, "Am I a farmer? Is this? I think this is what farmers do." Oh, wow. Okay, well that happened pretty quick, and I've enjoyed that ever since.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, you guys came into possession of it in 2019, which, so as you guys entered into 2020. What happened?
Oh, yeah. No, this is a great story. For the record books, right? No, you plant tulips in the fall, and you don't expect anything. And I remember in December, I want to say, again, as an intel officer, I try to keep track of what's going on in the world, just because it's a hard habit to break. I call myself a recovering intelligence officer. But I remember having a conversation with Donnie, first week in January, when we were tracking this stuff. He said, "Hey, if this goes global, that's going to get weirder quicker." And I said, "Yeah, but there's nothing we can do about it. So we just got to keep on going on." And the field that we planted, is the most beautiful field that we have. It's on it goes right up against the slough, and there's great barns, and it's our biggest field, so we had the most color. And then come first part of March, we knew things were going to get weirder quicker. And then when California shut down, we knew that we would be next. And I remember, so we were having daily meetings. I'm out at the farm getting everything ready, and we're anytime hail is the worst thing for tulips, and so hail would come through, and we kind of freak out because we're new at this, and you worry about it, and you worry about a lot of things. And what you don't worry about is people not being able to be on the farm. Right. And then I remember we huddled around the computer in the office when the governor shut everything down, and I stood up. All the partners were there. I stood up, and there's some tears, and I just said, "I'm going to go for a walk." And I walked across the parking lot and kind of walking back, and I realized that this is going to be the best thing to happen to our farm. And I think Rachel literally thought I lost my mind. She's like, "How can you say that?" I said, "I don't know, but we'll figure it out." And that's because that's what we do, right? Yeah. It's like we could get in the collective fetal position and throw up our arms, or we can go to work. And so we went to work, and we threw everything we had at this. We said, here's what we need to do. We need to figure out what revenue can we create. And so we got really creative, really fast. And that was very, very difficult, because you've got this pressure of all of the pressures of farming. Now you've got to invent brand new business models literally overnight. Yeah. Like, okay, by tomorrow we need to, and sometimes it was absolutely on the fly. I remember being on the phone, people were calling and saying, "What can we do? What can we do?" And people saying, "Hey, can you ship me flowers?" Well, tulips don't ship very well. Yeah. But that didn't matter, because people wanted to support us. And I was on the phone. I said, "Hey, tell you what, we'll call tomorrow and we'll figure out how to get you flowers." And Rachel hung up, and Rachel said to Angela, "Did Andrew just sign us up for shipping flowers?" It's a big deal. I mean, if you ever shipped anything, but yes. I mean, we ended up shipping, tens of thousands of packages all over the country with no infrastructure. We just figured it out on the fly. And those were some of the best times that we've had as a business. I mean, and I had the added benefit of doing it with my family. So like I said, I've got 6 kids. Every single one of them was involved with that. And throughout the pandemic, I at one point, I had worked with, or been side by side with 2 of my sons every day for 18 months for planting and harvesting, and we just don't have that experience anymore. Yeah. And I was able to have that during the pandemic, and we were really able to, and this is a little bit of both the more on the business side than the legal side, but I'm great friends with the dean of the business school down on PLU, and so I would call Mark Mulder now and again about things, and he would, say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And which was fantastic, to feel supported in that way. But to have the opportunity to in real time respond to a global pandemic and be the first one out of the gate, right? This was, you only get one shot with tulips. Right? Well, can't you hit pause? Can't you do, well, let's wait and maybe in June it'll be over. No, the tulips come on when the tulips come on. And if there's nobody there to see it, then what do you do?
Right.
And so I grabbed my cell phone and I went out and I started doing Facebook Lives. And that's really what we're known for now. Our brand is that we take punches and we give back everything we have, and we share color. And we know that people connect through color, and so we share in any way that we can. So we developed an app. We did, everything under the sun trying to connect people through color. And it became way more than just about growing flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, it was actually somewhat similar, not as drastic, but we took over the marketplace end of 2019, rolling into 2020. We're a retail espresso bakery shop.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was an interesting first year of business, but it does. It for us, it galvanized a lot of things, and it puts you in that place where you're like, oh, like now the decision's mine. What are we doing?
Oh, yeah.
What's the next step?
Yeah, there's no passing the buck.
Yeah. So that's great. So kind of looking ahead then, you've gotten 2021 under your belt, being able to, you guys were able to be open.
We had a great year, and weather makes such a big difference, right? So we had great weather, we had a great field. The Canadian border was closed, and about half of the people that come to visit Tulip Festival are from Canada.
Okay.
So they didn't get to come, but we still had a record year in terms of, we adjusted our business model a little bit. And so we really, really we're well supported in 2021, and we had a great year. That was good.
So then looking ahead for this year, what's kind of your guys' plan and goal this year?
So the plan and goal for this year is that's farming. And what is different about this year that people will notice is that the historic floods of last fall smacked Tulip Town in the face, right? We planted, so we plant every fall. Every year in the last 60 years, there's been a 7 to 10 day window after about mid-September that it dries out so that you can plant your tulips. That didn't happen this year. Not only did it not happen, there was 1.5 inches of rain on September 27th, and it never dried out. Still hasn't dried out. And so a lot of times the question will be, well, can't you plant earlier? Well, the risk is if you plant early, like we had hoped to plant. I mean, if it were up to me, I'd plant the Tuesday, first Tuesday in September and call it good. The problem is that the soil is too warm, and so you run the risk of molding your bulbs. Now, tulips are a mountain flower, so they do like cold and they don't like water. Well, we had a warm and wet fall. We rotate, so we're on 26 acres there at Tulip Town, but every year we're on a 4-year rotation for disease control. Well, it just so happens that the perfect storm, literally a perfect storm of weather, really, really thick clay and a low-lying field made it so that we were forced to plant our tulips in the mud that never dried out. Okay. And so we're looking at a catastrophic loss in terms of color. There are parts of the field where, it's a 5-acre field. There's parts of the field that are sandy and well drained, and the tulips are coming up just great. And there's parts of the field that are it's heartbreaking to do everything right. I mean, literally lying in the mud, at 10 p.m., trying to fix a tractor because you've got, and by a weather window, meaning it wasn't raining, doing everything you can, everything that can be done. I mean, we talked to every farmer that we knew. We called back to Holland. We called everyone, and they said, well, one, you shouldn't plant tulips in clay. And we said, thanks for that. And if you had to plant tulips in clay, make sure it's dry. Also, not an option. And get the water off as soon as you can. And there's still water on the field right now. And so, fortunately, what we did is we doubled down on our gardens last fall. So our gardens historically had a fence around them. And that's not really consistent with our brand either. We don't like fences. Yeah. And so we took the fences down. If there's a flat place in our 1.5-acre garden, it's got a tulip planted on it. So we have our iconic, the windmill. We also have the indoor space with the murals that are pretty famous. Yeah. We've doubled down on indoor attractions, if you will. Yeah. We know people love to come out and position or show everybody that they're on. We rebuilt Tulip Town for Instagram. Yeah. And so what we've done is we've had to say, okay, if we can't have 5 acres of color, what can we do?
Yeah.
And again, totally consistent with who we are and what we think. We're going to take this punch and we're going to provide our guests with the best experience we have. And I like to say that people come to Tulip Festival for the tulips. At least at Tulip Town, we're going to be putting an exclamation point on the festival part of it. Although we do have amazing tulips, and we just won't have the five acres of color that we've had in the past. And that's just at the end of the day, that's farming, and that's what historic floods look like. And it's super painful. And we're very public facing, right? And that's by design. And so as a farmer, to sit there and turn around to say, it's one thing. And I've talked to people like, well, just reseed. It's like, that's $1 million worth of bulbs. And I couldn't get them from Holland anyway. So there's no reseeding. It's not like potatoes or barley or something like that, where you get one shot at it. And if the variables don't align, when we bought Tulip Town, I asked Don McMorrin, who's the WSU extension director there in Skagit, I said, why are there only 2 bulb farmers left in Skagit Valley? And he said, you're going to find out. And we have absolutely found out. And so as challenging it is, we'll make the best of what we've got. We're very gracious hosts. We love throwing a party. It's just my concern is that I have put ego aside a long time ago, but there's a measure of real pain that goes with. I invited 500,000 people over, and they're expecting to see 5 acres of tulips that I can't provide through no fault of my own.
Yeah. No, I mean all of the stuff that's happened. I mean, farmers have the short end of the stick on every level.
No kidding.
I mean, I remember, so my wife grew up in Cedar Woolley, but was a lot more connected to Skagit than I was growing up. But when tourists would come through and they're like, well, why aren't the tulips here? Or like in Stanwood, they're like, well, why aren't the snow geese? Like, they're supposed to be here.
You push a button and they come up, right? Yeah. No, we had that conversation the other day where people they don't care. They just can't. They want to see, and that's not how it works. And so that's part of. I love being an ambassador for all things Skagit, especially on the farming side. So I have no problem having conversations like this because if you don't know, you don't know. But I think especially in the Pacific Northwest, there are tons of people in Seattle and Vancouver that do want to know.
Yeah.
They want to know where their food comes. It kind of gets to the the real cost of food.
Yeah.
The real, the grain economy that we're moving into, and having more cover crops, and why the birds are not a bad thing, even if you do have cover crops. We also own and operate Fairhaven Mill, and I tell people all the time, buy our flour. You save the whales, buy our flour, because the more local grain that we can get grown, the better the soil quality, the better the water quality, the better the salmon runs, right? So, eat local in a way that's sustainable and really be connected. And I think people want to have that conversation. They want to feel connected to Skagit. And I'm really excited to help people, our urban neighbors to really connect with Skagit, because it's not a park. That's the other thing that's really frustrating for farmers or landowners when people from out of the community come in, and it's fun to say respect the locals, but we really need to see that.
Yeah.
And I think there is a discerning measure of our urban neighbors who they understand that. You just don't park in a farmer's front yard to take pictures of snow geese. That's disrespectful, and it sours it for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think that when we can figure out how to make a connection an actual, like an authentic connection. I think that authenticity is our greatest strength in Skagit Valley, and there's 2 ends of that stick.
Yeah.
So and then figuring out the highest and best use, because I say that the laws of economics and gravity are not to be trifled with. If we cannot figure out a way to sustainably connect commerce to our natural beauty, then it's going to get weirder quicker, and nobody wants that.
Yeah. So, do you guys have? I know obviously we've got April, which is tulip time. But as you look throughout the calendar year, I know we actually went, I think 2 years ago. I think it was in 2020 that we went to when you guys had the pumpkin festival.
Oh, the harvest. Yes, the harvest at Tulip Town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a reason every season to be in Skagit Valley.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And certainly at Tulip Town, we like to say it's the spring and the fall. We also own and operate Skagit Acres there in South Mount Vernon. Mm-hmm. Used to be Skagit Valley Gardens.
Okay.
And that's 26 acres on I-5. And so the idea is that we'll move some of the things off of the Skagit Flats to give our neighbors a break, because I think they love living there every season. But being right on I-5, is an opportunity. When we purchased that property really as a platform where anyone driving through Skagit Valley would be able to stop and have a quintessential Skagit experience. We've got an amazing gift shop in there full of locally made things, a lot like you do here at the Commons. Little cafe, it's a garden center, but it's the 20 acres of ag land that's around there that we're excited about developing and really and figuring out how is it that we can make this Skagit experience as approachable to somebody who's just driving through, or they may be here for 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks, right? We want to be able to and it chokes in my throat to say commercialize, but to make an exchange of value that actually works. And so we feel like if we can do that, then other businesses will follow, and we'll be able to not only help the current existing farmers, but also inspire a rising generation of people who want to do things better and different that are connected to the ground.
Yeah. No, and I think that's important. I have a lot of discussion on this podcast about businesses and how, especially small business, locally owned, but that it brings value to the people in the community. Camano, Stanwood has seen a large growth in small businesses, and each one of them bring their flavor of whatever they're bringing to the table, and it benefits the whole community. Totally. Because the people that, the kids that are going through high school and stuff, they work at those shops, and the money that you spend at those shops goes back into the community. Right. And, I think there's this weird blend that the fact that we call a corporate business and a small business businesses is a very weird thing because they're completely different things. Yeah, the models are totally different. And so I think when we add in, people are like, well, we don't want to commercialize it. We don't want to have more businesses here. It's like, no, you just want to have the right businesses here. Oh, totally. Yeah. And that really speaks to the quality of life. And that's one thing that I keep coming back to. If we have a touchstone, is this good long-term for the quality of life in our community? Yeah. Because that is, a small business, that 3 to 5 person business that can become a 35 person business, but it can create, intergenerational wealth. And I'm on the board at Viva Farms there at the Port of Skagit, and I'm just shocked at how I shouldn't be, but I'm delighted that on average the Viva farmers are netting $25,000 an acre. Right, that's money that they can send their kids to college with. Yeah. Right, that is the American dream that's playing out, and I love that we get to do that in our community. And more than half of those farmers are Latino and women. Yeah. Right, and that's so exciting to be a part of, because you would not, I guess, and it's my own ignorance, but you wouldn't expect that, and so I extra delight in that. Yeah. No, that's great. I know that Skagit, Stanwood, all of them, like, you've seen these farming communities continue to shrink. Does there seem to be any sort of resurgence in more people at least interested in it? Or I think there is an interest, and then they figure out that maybe what attracted to them to it maybe isn't what pays the bills. Yeah. And so there's this romanticized idea, and I got sucked into it as well, right? And nobody can really explain it. I talked to a couple of friends even at WSU about that, and there's this idea that it's either this Jeffersonian democracy, of the citizen farmer, or we just like open space, right? And I think it's probably both. I like the idea of the open space, and I certainly enjoy being outside, working with my hands and covered in sweat and dust and diesel, and it has a strange lure, I guess, for some people. Yeah. But I think it's figuring out the business models that work. And what is encouraging is that there are more people. There's a willingness to pay that is, I think, on trend with a rising generation who are willing to tell the story. When commodity farmers, it's about grow it and throw it. Now, they have absolutely the same commitment to their families and to the land as a 3-acre farmer. Yeah. What's different is that 3-acre farmer is on TikTok every morning, right? They are choosing to connect in new and different ways to an audience, and they'll benefit from that. Yeah. And I don't know that every farmer needs to be on TikTok, right? But I do know for some businesses that makes a difference. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So on top of Tulip Town, you've mentioned Fairhaven Mills and Skagit Acres. Yeah. Where are you guys, I know you're focused in Skagit. What are all the different pieces that you guys are... No, so we have one more. We had one rule when we started Spinach Bus, and this is Randy Howard, our CFO, said, hey, no restaurants.
And if you figured out in the last little bit, rules aren't really my jam. And so we found out that a good friend and classmate of ours, Josie Urbick, she was a free agent. She had been the executive chef at the Seattle Art Museum.
Okay.
And so we'd all track Josie's food, and she's an amazing chef, and she was a free agent. And we said, hey, what if, and my team hates it when I say what if, but, and actually this wasn't my fault. This was Rachel said, hey, it looks like Josie's a free agent. And I said, well, if Rachel's on board with us bringing Josie in. So I reached out to Josie and she said, let's have a chat. We connected with the Port of Skagit. They had a vacant restaurant up there. And so the chocolate and peanut butter were that we had a world-class chef and they had a restaurant. And so we were able to make a deal work that worked for us for opening a restaurant, not only opening a restaurant, but opening a restaurant during a pandemic. And so we have Skagit Landing with Chef Josie Urbick. Just amazing food. It's actually on the runway up there at the Port of Skagit.
Okay.
It's a great place to go up and have an amazing food and watch the planes take off. It's something that we really are happy to bring to the community because, again, being from Skagit, we like to brag about Skagit.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of great restaurants in Skagit, and we felt like we could use one more. And that's kind of a destination. Hey, let's go up to the landing and grab lunch. We also there's this so Westland Distillery is in town now. We know there's catering opportunities that are going to come with Westland putting Skagit on the whiskey map. The Amazon facility that's just down the street from us, in addition to supporting all of the businesses at the business park there at the Port of Skagit. And so that's really as much a story about us trying to level up in the community. And of course, Josie took a big risk, the port took a big risk, and we feel like it is a good experience for us. So that's just one more thing. One more do hard thing. And Josie is she's a phenomenal businesswoman and a great chef, and we're so very fortunate that she jumped on with us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys have, so what is your kind of, obviously you're very heavily involved with Tulip Town.
Mm-hmm.
What's your involvement with the other aspects?
So I, after last summer, after harvest, so I had been going all out as the full-time CEO of all the partners. After June of last year, I was the only one that was full-time, and so I had gone from 18-hour days, literally over 500 hours last April, and then I had to get bulbs out of the ground, and then trying to make sure that the mill, thinks that's an operating business in and of itself with breaking news here and there, and trying to keep up with customers. And so last September, my partner, seeing that the spark was starting to dim in my eyes a little bit through just the sheer weight, we brought on Kristen Keltz as the full-time CEO to manage the day-to-day stuff, so that it could take a little bit of the immediate pressure off of me, and so that I could continue to focus on the strategy stuff. And so we also in the midst of all this, my phone would never stop ringing from people saying, hey, I like what you did over here. Could you help me with my business? And I would do what I could in between calls or driving to and from the businesses. And we said, hey, what if we started Spinach Bus Solutions, which is our consulting branch? And so that's what I do now. Okay. I love the day-to-day. They have to ask me to leave the meetings sometimes because I have so many ideas. But now the Idea Factory between my ears gets to go to work on behalf of the rest of the community, which is really, again, consistent with their brand. And so working with Helping Hands Food Bank and Cedar Woolley, I really enjoy that. Now that people can reach out and I can help more broadly at a level that really gets me out of bed and is not. It puts energy into my day instead of. And there's nothing that I did that I didn't enjoy. It's just the sheer
18-hour day
volume of. And then again with the kids and all that other fun stuff. The rest of my life is hey, let's put a little balance and put a little spark back in Andrew's eye and in time for festival. And of course, it'll be extra sparky with the way that it is right now. But that's life and so that's what I do on top of being a PUD commissioner.
We didn't even mention that.
And that's I want to say it is the easiest thing that I do, just because the PUD right now the Skagit PUD is so well run. I really enjoy working with the other commissioners and being able to really try to champion doing things new. And champion innovation and making sure that our public infrastructure is positioned for the future instead of trying to navigate by the rearview mirror. So I do a little bit of that too.
Yeah. How did you get kind of involved in that? What kind of sparked that to make you think,
It's another
I should
one of
do that?
those. Yeah, no, I tried to get everybody else to do it, and they said, nope, you should do it. Water is so important to Skagit Valley. And it's also PUD Commissioner and Port Commissioner are the only part-time elected officials in Skagit Valley, other than city, and I live in the county, so only one's option for me. And the District 1 opened up, and I said, yeah, water is really important, and it's a seat at a table. We need to have the farmer voice, the visionary voice, the disruptor voice, quite frankly, and I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why, and it's just one of those civic duty things. Like, well, I was just raised to step up, and it looks like the community could need me, and if they want me, they'll pick me, and they did.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you do all of these other things. What do you kind of hope as the future for Skagit Valley?
I really think I hope, I would love to see Skagit Valley embrace a theme of resilience, because I think internally individually we're very resilient.
Yeah.
I grew up sandbagging the Skagit River, right? And that was the whole community. We get together and bag sand, and then we go back to our lives. And it could be just by virtue of our Scandinavian and German background. You know, you meet at church and you wave and everybody's nice, and then you go back to your lives. At a systems level, we're not doing it as well as we could. And I think that we're starting to see a little bit more of that. I would love to see us embrace some of our collective opportunities and work together across the community. I really think that it's our natural beauty that's going to set us apart.
Yeah.
And being distinguished means that we can command a higher price.
Yeah.
So we're going to be able to get more because we offer more. And I think if we offer more in terms of an experience, it's almost like, and I use the example of Tillamook all the time. You go down to Tillamook and you have a spiritual experience with ice cream or cheese, right?
Yeah.
And then you revisit that every time that you're at the dairy counter in every store, wherever. And truth be told, most of that milk's coming out of Boardman, which is not Tillamook, right? So the business model lacks authenticity. But we have the opportunity to do that in Skagit, where people would continue to support it because they come up and they enjoy the tulips. They come up and they love the birds. They may or may not know that the Skagit River is the third largest river system on the West Coast, right? And so we know these things, but we haven't made the connection commercially to be able to say, this is important to me. I want to support it with my time and my treasure. Yeah. And I think we have a huge opportunity to do that. We now need to position existing businesses and start new businesses in our communities that are oriented towards that. Yeah. And that's disruptive, and existing businesses may or may not see it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who will cross the street when they see me coming because they don't like that. And that's unfortunate. I think that's common in any community. Nobody chooses to be disrupted. Right. Right. The alternative is, and I love the Abraham Lincoln quote of the best way to predict the future is to create it. Yeah. And so if we can make these investments and make the calculated policy risks in the direction of creating and facilitating and connecting these types of businesses, and I think that's where we start to get the wins.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited for Skagit Valley. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
I bought Duolingo Pro. I love foreign language. And so, yeah, my son had Duolingo Pro, and he was killing me on all the points. And so I bought Duolingo Pro, and I love Duolingo. Yeah.
Awesome. What language are you currently working on?
Spanish and Portuguese. I do Portuguese in the morning because I'm half asleep. I get up really early, about 4 a.m., and so I do some Portuguese, and then at night I do Spanish.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Who is the most influential person outside of your family in your life?
I think that depends on the season, but if I were to say, I was thinking about this on the way down too, as well as a but-for statement. But for this person, my life would be completely different. I had a mentor when I was a young father in Puyallup, Marty, who really helped me to start to think clearly about things and to really kind of put aside perspectives that didn't work for me that maybe I'd been raised with. And so, yeah, Marty Daybell is the guy for me on that one. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And fill in the blank in this question. I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
Dance with my wife. Right. My wife has never danced with me, not at our wedding, never. Right. And so I think that is weird. That's something to remember. And no shade. She's the most wonderful person in the world. She just doesn't want to dance. And so one of these days, maybe I'll get her to dance with me.
That's great. Have you done a lot of dancing?
Oh, I
then?
love to dance. Yeah, especially when nobody's watching. Right?
Okay.
I'm not a good dancer, but
Awesome. Who is an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
I would interview my friend Don McMorrin from WSU Extension. Nobody knows nobody's got his finger on the pulse of Skagit agriculture, or even in North Snohomish and Whatcom than Don McMorrin. Yeah.
Okay.
He's the first person I called when I moved back to the valley and said what's going on.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. And then, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I would tell my 20-year-old self to slow down. Right. I like I said, I lived in 3 times fast forward, and I feel like I missed a lot of the experiences on hurry onto something else because I thought there was something better. So I would tell myself to slow down.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into the very end, I completely forgot to mention in here, but you actually have your own podcast that hopefully is going to be revived at some point. But you've got Connect Skagit.
I do, yeah.
So tell us just a little bit about that.
Well, and this is one of the things that sprung out of my campaign is the part of running for public office that I enjoyed the most was talking to people. And I would just have so many fantastic stories. Meeting people, and I said, well, more people should know that. And podcasts is a great, forum to go long on. And so I said, well, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to do Connect Skagit. And my son was the producer, and he's supposed to have taught his sister how to do it. And then he went off and moved to Ecuador. And so that's why I read somewhere, it's like, if you can get to 10 podcasts, then you're going to keep it good. And I think I got to 15, and then my producer left. But I have people stop me all the time. It's like, hey, Andrew, I missed your podcast. You should get that going again. But yeah, it's Skagit stories, and I love sharing. I love being an ambassador for Skagit, and that's one of the ways to do it. You're doing a great job on this one too, by the way.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Andrew Miller for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.